So welcome to round two. I teach at Franklin, and I do research on innovation. So when my students came to me and said, "Oh, you have to present your research at TEDx," at first I thought, why? And then I thought, well, maybe it's because when we say that word innovation, we start thinking about engineers and scientists in some laboratory, and maybe those guys at Google and Apple thinking up really strange product ideas. Or maybe those chefs, those very creative people we know, laboratories and kitchens. The kind of innovation I'm going to talk to you about today is very, very different. It's innovation that comes from us, from everyday people doing those everyday things that we do. We don't tend to give much value to that, but I want to show you the potential that's there. Before I get to my research, I want to tell you a little story about myself. When I was 16 and growing up in California, I worked all summer and I bought my first car, a Ford Mustang convertible. I loved that car, but I had a dog. I also loved my dog. His name was Brock, and he used to hang out in the back seat with his head out the window. Now, if I didn't roll down the window exactly as he wanted it, he used to scratch at the upholstery and ruin it. So I went to the car store, and I bought these wonderful car seats that they had available. They're great for babies, but the paws and the claws of my dog. So I went to the hardware store, and I bought these kitchen mats, and I put them underneath the car seat. Now, that worked. But you know what? I wasn't the only one with that idea. They now sell for $24.99, something very, very similar on Amazon.com. Oh, by the way, that isn't Brock. This is Brock. And now you know why I had the problem. So it was a great idea. I didn't jump on it, but somebody else did. But you know what? My story isn't as uncommon as we think. Users all over the place are using products, improving them, and making them more adapted to their specific needs. So some researchers at MIT in Boston got a hold of this and decided to see, well, how really widespread is this phenomenon? So they went to the United Kingdom and they did a study. And what did they find? Well, they found that 6.1% of the adult population engages in some sort of product innovation every year. That probably doesn't sound like very much, right? Well, it's 2.9 million individuals. Still not impressed? Well, let's give those individuals a value. Let's give that work a value. It turns out that those individuals spent an average of 4.8 days inventing new products. That's 4.8 days of their free time. If I multiply that by an average hourly wage in the UK and then add in some of the expenses they had while they were doing this product innovation, I get a number that's pretty interesting. 3.2 billion pounds. That's what their efforts are worth. Still not impressed? Let's compare it to firms. Now you're probably thinking that that number isn't anywhere near the amount of research and development that big English firms spend. British Petroleum, Shell Oil, British Airways, Rolls-Royce. That's what we thought too. But the total research and development expenditures of all UK firms combined, 2.3 billion. What does that show me? It shows me that this thing of user innovation is not a trivial phenomenon. Okay, so that's the UK. What about in the United States and other countries? In the United States and the Netherlands, where the same study's been done, numbers are pretty similar. In Japan, consumers tend to be a little bit less active, so culture clearly plays a role. The study hasn't been done in Switzerland, so I decided to study you guys. I had the organizers ask you some questions when you signed up for the ticket. The first question I asked you is, in your free time, do you find yourself innovating, reinventing, or improving the products you use all the time? 76% of the respondents here said yes, either sometimes or even often. And you came up with some great product ideas, some of which I've noted here. But then I asked you a second question. Have you ever shared those ideas with anybody or done anything about them? And here the numbers were reversed. 76% of you said no. Maybe I've talked to somebody, but I haven't taken it any further than that. So here's the problem. So many of us are doing incredible product development work, but we don't follow through. But the world is changing. And technology is now enabling us to do things that we never thought of before. There's open source, there's e-commerce, there's crowdfunding, there's 3D printers. And as a result, what's happening is that more and more users are starting to share their ideas. And they're starting to make successful businesses from their product ideas. Let me give you 2 examples. Here's a mother. She was so sick and tired of wearing those standard baby bags with all of the outfits that she wore. Very unfashionable. So she decided to make her own line of baby sacks. Nice accessories, different fabrics, different colors. She now sells those online from home, her own online business. And for those of you that know, or those few of you that might even use TRX, right? You should know that it was developed by Navy SEALs out in the field, just trying to stay fit with the only thing they could get their hands on, parachute jumps. Both great ideas developed by individuals that were just trying to make their everyday lives better. They jumped on those ideas, and that's the power, that's the potential that is in user knowledge. So if those of you out there that are tinkering with products to make them better for yourselves, don't underestimate the value of what you're doing. It just might be that those ideas are good for other people too. But what about at work? Can we transport this idea of user entrepreneurship, because these are user entrepreneurs, into the work environment? Well, who are users at work? They're not those final consumers anymore. They're businesses that use the products of other businesses in the products that they make. But can those businesses improve on the products that their suppliers are giving them? Can they make improvements in those products that they have no experience in making? We asked ourselves that question. And we decided to go to the most unlikely place that we would find anything like that, the semiconductor industry. The semiconductor chips, those are those microelectronic chips that we find in so many products today. We find them in our phones, in our cars, in our televisions, and even in our refrigerators, right? Why is that an unusual place to go and look for user innovation and user entrepreneurship? Well, because semiconductor chips are really, really complicated things to make. Okay? And the logic would tell me that if I know how to make a car or a TV or even a refrigerator, I'm probably not going to know much about making a semiconductor chip. And certainly not more than those guys at Intel that spend their whole life doing that. But we were wrong. Okay? We had a surprising result. Look at this. This chart shows the number of patents that are registered in the semiconductor industry over a 10-year period of time. The black line, larger, are patents registered by user firms. downstream user firms. The purple line are semiconductor firms. Users are patenting more semiconductors than semiconductor firms themselves. Okay, so they're innovating. Are they entrepreneurs? Can they start a business? Look at this. Of the 700 startups in the semiconductor industry over the same 10-year period, 31% came from users leaving their jobs in car companies and phone companies and starting up a semiconductor firm. You say, where's that coming from? They don't know advanced semiconductor technology, but they have a secret weapon. They know how those chips need to be used in their products. They have user knowledge because phones use chips, cars use chips, refrigerators use chips, and I know that. And therefore, you find them starting their own business. These are users starting businesses from the knowledge they have about the products they use. And for you investors out there, that's a really important discovery because that's where the next innovations are going to come from. So, I got it at home, I got it at work. But you know what? So far I've only been talking about rich countries where people have time to spare and money to invest in product development. You're probably saying, this can't be relevant in the rest of the world or in income-poor countries where resources are really scarce. So we asked ourselves that same question. And we went to the so-called bottom of the pyramid, those red countries that you see here on the map. Specifically, we went to rural India. What did we find? And after that talk from the guy from the kid from Kenya, you're not going to be surprised, okay? Users there are doing the exact same thing they're doing here. If the products aren't right, if they don't work, if they don't fit our needs the way we need to have those products, they come up with their own solutions. Not with a lot of money, but with local resources and a lot of user knowledge about how those products need to work in their contexts. In rural India, one of the major causes of death are snake bites. What happens is that you get respiratory paralysis from the poison. Ventilators can save patients as long as they get ventilation very, very quickly. What's the problem? Ventilators are very expensive, they run on electricity, and they're not very transportable from village to village. So, Dr. Geisis invented the Newman ventilator. He's a doctor in one of these rural villages. Not a lot of resources. It's not very expensive. It runs on battery and even has a manual backup in case no electricity and the batteries run out. And it's transportable. You can take it around from village to village very easily where those people are. Not only has he saved a lot of patients, but he now sells this ventilator to rural doctors all over the world. And meet the Hussein brothers. They needed water to irrigate their fields. But those pumps that run on diesel fuel were just too expensive for them to buy. They live in a windy area in India with lots of bamboo trees. Watching their mother, who was always sewing, they understood that the circular movement can be translated into up and down vertical movement, right? What did they invent? A windmill made of bamboo and plastic that they found lying around. Free energy to pump the water from their mills, right? And now they've made a business selling these windmills to other rural farmers around India. So there's an important lesson here. And the lesson is that the solutions for these kinds of contexts don't need to come from big companies, research-rich organizations, and advanced technology. There's a lot of great ideas out there. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking those ideas, but we also need to think broader. We also need to think that the users can come up with their own solutions. And then We need to help them to do that. We need to help them to take their products developed in their context with their user knowledge and share them with others, and maybe even take them to the market. So my message here today is very brief. There's something really useful and potentially very valuable in user knowledge. It's at home, it's at work, it's in rich countries, and it's in poor countries. It drives innovation. And if we only can believe in our ideas, it's also going to drive job creation. Thank you.